Okay, real estate agents are still freaking out and they are getting confused on what to do with compensation. What does the compensation mean in the listing agreement? How does that translate into negotiations, into the 1-to-4 contract? What does compensation mean in the buyer's representation agreement? How does that translate when the seller is not paying compensation? Who pays for that? What forms do you use? And then we have the changes in the 1-to-4 contract, paragraph 12, which offers compensation. There's so much going on right now with the changes in compensation in all the forms. I want to take this moment and go over all the different areas and all the changes to the form and explain compensation and how to go about negotiating your compensation, writing up the compensation, and explaining compensation to your buyers and sellers. So here we go. There are a few ways real estate agent can get paid. The first way you get paid is by the seller directly. The seller directly pays you. On the HUD, it says the seller paid you directly. We're going to talk about where to write that and how that works. The second way you can get paid is from the broker. The broker collects the compensation at the listing agreement, and the broker divides that compensation or splits that compensation percentage to you. So you are getting paid broker to broker. It's collected at the listing. Or you are getting paid seller to buyer's agent. It's collected at closing. Or you're getting paid by your buyer. So that means that the listing broker said, we're not sharing compensation. The seller said, I'm not paying buyer's agent compensation. So then now you have to go back to, what does your buyer's rep agreement say? What did the buyer agree to pay you? And start using all of your negotiation skills to get that done. So let's get started. And I'm going to start pulling up form by form. Just real fast, the section on compensation. So paragraph 7 is broker compensation, and this paragraph has been updated. So it is for buyer or tenant agreements, right? So you're going to put on there either a flat fee or a percentage of the sales price. Now read below. Broker seeks first to obtain payment from the seller, the landlord, or their agents, meaning the brokerage on the other side of the deal. So when you are writing this up with your buyers, you need to explain to them that in reality, nothing has changed after the NAR settlement when it comes to who we seek compensation from first. We seek it first from the seller, the landlord, or their agents. Then if we cannot get compensation from the other broker or from the seller directly, who's responsible for that compensation? That would be you, Mr. Buyer, are responsible for the compensation. When that happens, you have a couple of different options. Your buyer might say, well, Edie, I don't have 3% to pay you. I got to pay closing costs. I got to pay down payment. And now I have to pay your compensation. I don't have it. Well, this is important because now you're going to write an offer very differently. Now, when you write the offer, you're going to, let me add the 1-to-4 contract. You're going to negotiate your compensation. Look at paragraph 12 of the contract. This has been updated in 2025, and your options are the seller will pay the compensation on behalf of the buyer. Now, recently, I have seen where there's confusion that they actually think that if the buyer owes you compensation, you write it there and it means your buyer is paying you compensation. No, technically, kind of, not really. So the buyer's rep agreement says the buyer owes you 3%, 2%, 1%, whatever that is, right? And then here, the seller, out of the seller's pocket, is paying you on behalf of what the buyer agreed to pay you. So when you write something here, you must understand it's not coming out of the buyer's pocket when you write it here, even though the buyer is the one that owes you that money. It's coming out of the seller's net. Then the paragraph below is buyer's closing costs. They're the same but different. So if at the end of the day, the buyer has to pay for your compensation, it's a buyer closing cost, but it's not the closing cost towards their loan, towards their down payment. It's a different closing cost. It's a different line in the settlement statement. So paragraph B is the buyer's closing cost, which he owes you towards the compensation. Paragraph C is the buyer's closing costs, which he owes the lender, the title, the down payment, all of those closing costs. So don't get them confused. If you want the seller to contribute to your compensation, you write it on paragraph B. If you want the seller to contribute towards the buyer's closing costs, meaning closing from the loan, you're going to ask for it in paragraph C. Okay, so that's the first start of it, right? Now let's go into the negotiations at the listing table and how all that plays out. So when you take a listing now, we have two options, box A or box B. We explain to the seller, Mr. Seller, I can either collect both compensations today. That would be paragraph A. And I will split it up between myself and a procuring cause buyer's agent who brings us a buyer. That's option one. Or, Mr. Seller, we have option B, which is I will only collect my compensation. Today at the listing table, we're writing my compensation agreed upon, right? And we're not going to offer any specific compensation for another buyer's agent. The broker is not paying the buyer's agent. So, Mr. Seller, now we have to negotiate the buyer's agent compensation depending on what the offer looks like. So, let's take a look at this. So we have the listing agreement. Let's go straight to that. In the listing agreement, you have two options, Mr. Seller. Option A right here, paragraph 1A, is the total compensation. Buyer's agent, listing agent, you are collecting both like we used to for 100,000 years, right? You're collecting both. And paragraph 2, you are giving part of that total back to a buyer's agent. The top is all 6%, 4% total. Then the bottom is split 3 and 3, 2 and 2, 1 and 1. Don't just put yours on top. You have to do total because the broker's the one that's collecting, the broker's the one that's dividing, and the broker's the one that's paying them at the closing table. Option A. Now we have option B. You are just collecting your compensation as the listing agent. The listing agent compensation total and zero compensation is being offered to the buyer's agent at the listing table. So this is the part that gets everybody so confused. Just because at the listing table you're not negotiating a buyer's agent compensation does not mean that the seller shouldn't offer a buyer's agent compensation. They're just going to offer it at a later time. They're going to negotiate through it with the 1-to-4 contract. So what does that look like? Looks like this. So in that page, what is it? Page 6, paragraph 12, where it says the seller will agree to pay X amount, is how you negotiated if your listing agreement, you have chosen paragraph B. The listing says I'm only collecting my compensation. So when an offer comes, you can negotiate the buyer's agent compensation right here. Let's say they write a lowball offer. Let's say they write a full price offer. Let's say they ask for 4%, 1%, whatever that is. You are offering the seller the opportunity to negotiate not just the sales price, but to negotiate the actual compensation for the buyer's agent. If we choose paragraph A, that means you are sharing your compensation. You must use compensation agreement between brokers. So along with the offer, you will also ask for the compensation agreement between brokers where your brokerage is offering to pay another brokerage a certain amount per the listing agreement. Okay? If you chose paragraph B, then there is no compensation agreement between brokers because the brokers aren't agreeing to pay another broker anything. The seller is agreeing to pay. Therefore, you only need this right here. With this 1-4 contract, paragraph 12, the seller legally is agreeing to pay the buyer's agent commission on behalf of the buyer. Because at the end of the day, whose responsibility is this? This is the buyer's responsibility at the end of the day. It's negotiable. We seek it first from the owner, from the broker, from the landlord, yet the buyer at the end of the day is responsible for it. And then let's look at one last thing, which is the last page. One more. Here we go. So when do you fill this page out? When do you put on here the percentage? And this is paragraph 10 of the 1-4 contract. You fill this out when another broker, read what it says, another broker, according to a listing agreement, agreed to pay you, broker to broker. So you use the compensation agreement between brokers and you put it here. You do not put it in this paragraph right here. Nope. This is only if the broker is not offering compensation, is that you put it here and then you do not write it here. All right. So let's review. We have buyer's representation agreement. We have the agreed upon compensation between you and your buyer. You seek first to get paid from the other parties. Okay. Then we have the listing agreement, that you have two options to write up the listing agreement. You have option A, which is you're collecting everybody's compensation and you're dividing it, the broker is dividing it, or you're selecting option B, you're only collecting your compensation and you're not collecting a buyer's agent compensation. Then we have the compensation agreement between brokers, which is only used when the broker is offering compensation, not the seller. The broker is offering compensation. And then we have the changes in the 1-4 contract, where you can negotiate the sales price and negotiate your compensation as a buyer's agent. Hopefully this was helpful. Remember, we are negotiating machines. We work hard for our clients. We earn our compensation every day.